so much fun and terrific music. Well, when I was growing up, not only was the music in church that I enjoyed, that not only did it sound like what we just heard, every summer my church would hold something called a vacation Bible school. Any of you ever been to one of those? We went to church every single day for an entire week. It was exhausting. But at the end of that week, the church put on a big dinner, and the kids would give a presentation for the grown-ups, their parents, to show off what we had learned. Usually it was in the form of a stage play or a musical, and one year the theme of the whole week was how great it was to believe, to be a believer. Believing is good, not believing bad. One of the Bible stories we studied that week was about doubting Thomas. So our teacher said, we're going to act the story out for the grown-ups at the big dinner on Friday night, and we need to choose who is going to play which role. And I wanted to play Thomas. And now, according to our teacher, if there was anyone in this story who was the heretic or the bad guy, or just the village idiot, because he did not have enough faith, it was Thomas. She said, oh, you can't play Thomas. You're the minister's son. But what about Jesus? Don't you want to be the risen Christ? I said, no, Thomas is more interesting. She looked at me very disapprovingly and said, I think we should ask your father. So we trudged down to my dad's office, the minister, to ask him if it would be okay for me to play Thomas instead of Jesus. And he just laughed. He said, I don't care who plays Thomas, but why don't you let a girl play Jesus? Which I don't think the teacher had considered, but that's what happened. My dad was a forward-thinking kind of guy. I wanted to play Thomas because, and I know this is hard to believe, but as a child I was kind of a ham. And I understood that the role of Thomas had the most dramatic range to it. He goes from one way of being to another way of being. So in hindsight, I realized that this teacher's hesitation for me to play Thomas was based on a pretty common prejudice about Thomas, that because of his doubt, he was less than a stellar character, or that he, among all the disciples, was flawed because he refused to believe that Jesus had risen from the dead. So the prevailing wisdom was, you don't want to be like doubting Thomas. That was to be an unbeliever. And the whole theme of Vacation Bible School that year, after all, was something like the joy of believing. Now, what my dad understood is that my teacher and many people had Thomas all wrong. In practically every Bible story you can name, there is at least one character who the author has put there to serve as a stand-in for you and me. And in this story, it is absolutely Thomas. We are all Thomas. So we ought to backtrack a little. As the story goes, the people who were gathered together when Jesus first appeared to them in a resurrected form actually saw Jesus, but Thomas had missed out on that. And there were all kinds of theories about what Thomas might have been doing. Was he out getting groceries? Was he engaged in some kind of unsavory behavior? Because after all, if he's the kind of person who's going to be a doubter, that also makes sense for him to be a thief or a con artist or something. The thing is, the absence of Thomas is significant because in the very same way, anyone reading this story or hearing it told years later, they had missed out on seeing Jesus too. They had never seen Jesus. By the time anyone actually heard or read this story that John told, the events that it is describing had happened 70 years earlier or more. That'd be like you and me hearing about things that happened in 1955. We might have been alive back then, but it's doubtful we would have been eyewitnesses to a story like this one. So when Jesus says, blessed are those who have not seen but still believe, that's not an indictment of Thomas. He's not saying, Thomas, you're an unfaithful person. Tisk, tisk, tisk. The way John writes this dialogue, Jesus is simply stating the obvious. It's an affirmation, really, that's perfectly normal It is perfectly normal to have doubts about what you cannot prove. And he is saying that seeing, having physical proof, is not a prerequisite to believing in anything. And conversely, even when we do see something that seems reliable, that doesn't mean we always believe in it. A few years back, I was watching a program streaming on Hulu, I believe, and it was called In and of Itself. Anyone see that? Okay, I can say anything I want about it. But it was the taping of a stage show that was held in a relatively intimate theater in New York City, starring a very unique magician. His name was Derek Delgadio. It was partly a one-man monologue, part magic show, part audience interaction experience. And Derek talked a lot about his own life, and he performed some very impressive illusions and completely amazed the audience. And the audience was fascinating in itself because there were a lot of very famous people, a lot of big names in the crowd, like Bill Gates was sitting over here, Barbara Streisand was over there. Now, if you can do magic in front of Bill Gates, and he's impressed, and if you can do any kind of stage show and make Barbara Streisand give you a standing ovation, that's saying something. But the show is really about the nature of identity, Derek's identity, his own sense of self, while he challenged the audience members to think deeply about who they are as individuals, how they see themselves. He was really able to connect people to how they feel about who they are, and it was deeply affecting in a cathartic way. And a lot of the audience members were breaking down in tears. And if you've never seen Bill Gates blubber like he just took away all of his money, well, that is worth watching. But it was like a religious experience. Now, I really like magic, and I have for a long time. So while watching that program, I couldn't help myself. I was trying to figure out how Derek was pulling off all of his illusions. But beyond the technicalities of that, the great thing about magic is this. As an observer, you know that what you're watching is not real. You know you're watching a magic show. You know you're watching an illusion. But on another level, your senses are telling you this is real. I believe this is happening. This rabbit is being pulled out of a hat. This person from the audience is being sawed in half. So we're holding two opposing ideas in our head all at the same time: unbelief and belief. And the whole point of Derek's show, I think, was to point out that in our lives, in who we think we are and who we say we are and how we present ourselves to the world, it's important to find and try to understand the truth about ourselves and the truth about each other. In the midst of all the illusions we put up to say, this is who I am, in the midst of what we believe is the truth. That really sounds a lot more complicated than it really is. I believe what Jesus was saying to Thomas and to you and me is that what we see and what we believe about the truth is not always so cut and dried. Now, you've probably heard this example before, and maybe I've even given it before, but I don't remember. But picture this scene. Two cars collide at an intersection. Thankfully, no one's hurt. But a green car and a blue car have crashed into each other, and there are three witnesses. People who just happen to be standing at the very same street corner, and they all see the same event unfolding, two cars colliding. So a police officer arrives and must determine which one of these drivers is at fault, who should be handed the citation, the ticket. The officer interviews each of the witnesses separately. Witness number one says the driver of the green car is clearly at fault. Witness number two says the driver of the blue car is the guilty one. Witness number three says no one's at fault. It's just one of those things, could have happened to anyone. Each witness is adamant that they are right about what they have seen, and all three of them assign thoughts and feelings and motivations to each of the drivers. What they've seen with their own eyes, each witness says, is the truth. And so the police officer is confused but not surprised, because it's not unusual for eyewitnesses to have differing views about the very same thing. The police officer understands something that we often forget. that our perception of the same thing we're all seeing will differ depending on our personal experience, our bias, our prejudice, or just how we're feeling that day. So the kind of day that we're having. So we're all working with limited vision, or vision that's influenced by hundreds of different factors. None of us can absolutely see and understand everything clearly. And that does not mean truth is relative, that there's no absolute truth. It only means we all operate within certain illusions about ourselves and about each other. Now, the truth that the disciples learned was that love is more powerful than anything, even death itself, which I believe that's the greatest truth of all. Believe in that, and you've pretty much got life figured out. A lot of things fall into place. Maybe not every single thing, but a lot of things, most things. Our problem is we all have varying degrees of difficulty of buying into that truth. You and me, because we call ourselves Christians, we've been exposed to that truth, and we may believe in that truth through the story of Jesus. But beyond that basic truth that love is stronger and more enduring than anything, things can get hazy. We are experts at putting conditions on that truth and making up rules about that truth, which explains why there are so many religions and denominations and why so many of our friends and neighbors are absolutely fed up with organized religion of any kind, but also justifiably fed up because people like us who belong to organized religion so often claim that our truth is the only truth and everyone else is misguided, sadly. Try telling that to the police officer who's just trying to write a traffic citation after a crash. Now, you and me here in this congregation, we don't ever say that our particular version of the truth is the only correct version of it. But the problem is this: no one out there beyond our walls is aware that we don't make that kind of claim. So they might very well assume that we do, believe that we hold the only correct version of the truth. Thankfully, we don't believe that. So we need to work harder to make sure people out there understand that about us, because it's priceless. It's wonderful. It's good news. But if we did believe that kind of thing, we would see our truth as being the truth because we're looking at it through the lens of experience, our bias, and how we're feeling. And historically, Christians have been known to say quite often, God loves and accepts you, but only if you believe in certain things, or only if you say a certain set of words, which honestly, that leaves a whole lot of people outside the circle of God's love, doesn't it? Still the case in many forms of Christianity. People on the outside has meant that gay people or divorced people or people who haven't been baptized in the correct way are not included in God's embrace. And the tradition I grew up in, if you were not baptized by being dunked completely underwater and held there for a minute, you were not legit. So I'm in the clear. I'm very sorry for the rest of you. Not really. The thing is, by definition, if you think it's proper to exclude anyone because of what they believe or who they are or the method of their baptism, then you're denying or you're doubting the truth that love is more powerful than anything. And I think people believe that and behave that way for a couple of reasons. One is it's often just how we've been taught and told any alternative. And it for us, it just feels way too easy to say love is love and God accepts everyone no matter what, no strings attached. Because we've been taught and we experience so often, our experience so often tells us that there are no free rides in this life, that you've got to earn love of any kind, that you must suffer through confirmation class, and you must believe in this thing in the Bible as the literal truth, whatever that thing is, or else you're not a real Christian. Anyone ever told you that? You're not a real Christian? I have. If you've never heard it before, though, let me be the guy who says that is complete hogwash. And that is the real illusion. Because it's simply not your prerogative, nor is it mine or any minister's to place any kind of limits on God's love, especially if we claim every Easter and every Sunday that God is love and God's love is stronger than anything. And that's the whole point of the resurrection, after all. The second reason we ever deny or doubt that truth is because for a lot of us, and maybe most of us, life has taught us that we are not enough. So we have to pretend that we are. Like good magicians, we have to create an illusion about ourselves. Because at some point on our journey, we bought into the lie that we are not, let's see, smart enough, pretty enough, talented enough, athletic enough, thin enough, ambitious enough, tough enough, cool enough, educated enough, whatever enough. Have you ever noticed how hard we try every day to fulfill expectations we think that other people have about us because we're trying so hard to be enough? How much we wish that people could see who we really are on the inside. How much we simply want to be understood. And how so often the facade, the illusion we build up about ourselves also becomes the expectations and the rules that we impose on others. After all, if we're having to keep up appearances, then everyone else ought to, right? So what if I told you, yes, you are enough already? That God created you and accepts you and loves you just the way you are right now, and that you do not need to pretend or prove you're anything that you are not. That just being who you are, your authentic self, is perfect. Because that's also what is meant by the truth that love is stronger and more enduring than anything. Anything includes any illusion that you're not enough. When we can believe in that love is unlimited, then we know what it means to live in that state that Jesus calls blessed. He said, "Blessed are those who believe even when they have not seen." Because none of us can see everything clearly. We're all like Thomas, remember? Now, eventually, Thomas did get to see the truth clearly and with his own eyes. And in the meantime, for you and me, even though our vision is always limited, we also get to see the truth of that love. We see it when together we collect food for the hungry. We see it when we gather together just like this in person or online. We see it whenever any one of us is hurting or afraid or has suffered a loss, and we embrace them with support and love. That's no illusion. We see that undying, unlimited love every day in one another. And we believe. Amen.